Hello again, I'm Jimmy D. This is Real Home Garage. Today on Real Home Garage, our project will be installing frame rail connectors in a Mopar B-body. If you've watched me before, you'll notice that this is not the Project 66 charger. It's actually a 68 charger. I'm doing these for a friend of mine. Project 66 charger. I installed the frame rail connectors some time ago before I was videotaping. So the cars are virtually identical underneath. The process is exactly the same. And so we're going to use this as our representation today. Now, all Mopar B-bodies are unibody construction. What's a unibody? Unibody means it doesn't have a solid one-piece separate frame. You can't pick a frame off a Chrysler B-body. The frame rails are actually part of the body of the car. They're welded to the floorboards. They're welded to the firewall. The rear frame rail on the B-body, again, it's tied to the floorboard of the trunk. It comes up. Here's your leaf spring hanger, and it's tied into the rear floor well. You can see it kind of jogging around in the ends. All your load in that B-body is transferred through the rocker panels, through the roof line, and carried to the front frame rail that's connected to your torsion bar cross member. So what we want to do is add a frame rail connector, hook these two frames together, and tie these frames to give the car some rigidity under those high horsepower, high torque applications. Now before I get all the hate mail, I have set this car up on its side. It has cabling on the back side that's holding the car there, so don't get all excited I'm going to fall and get crushed. I worry about safety an awful lot in this. I don't want anybody getting hurt. I have the engine hoist here just to give me a secondary line of help. I like to, I can't depend on just one form, same as a jack and jack stand. You never get under the car with just a jack. You want the jack stands or two jack stands. Don't take a chance. It doesn't do any good to have invested your time and money for your family to find you crushed underneath your vehicle or something stupid like that. So this car is secured from the back side, and even with my safety, I have double straps here to kind of help hold this in position just because I'll be working and pounding and beating, and I don't want to get hurt. So what are we going to do? Tools today. If you have your car ready to go, you're going to need a welder. I will be showing you my welder in a little bit. It's a small little 110 wire flux core welder. I'm not going to use the big fancy welders. Here we are. We're Real Home Garage. We can't afford to go out and spend $5,000, $4,000 on a welder. You can get a welder for in the hundreds of dollars a range that'll do what you need to do. Yeah, you'll get some splatter. There'll be some challenges with it. It'll take a little extra work, but we're trying to keep these things within budget. So we've got our welder. We're going to need some hammers, of course. We're going to need something to strip some paint and materials with, a body grinder, a Dacto style grinder with changeable pads, and some wire brushing, and a bunch of clamps. Now, to put the frame rail connector on, I said we're going to need some clamps. I'll be using a small 1-inch C-clamp and a 2.5-inch C-clamp. That's what I'll be using today to do this. It's a good thing for, Christmas time. The family says, hey, what can I get you for Christmas? You can never have enough clamps. So clamps are a great thing. As you see on this B-body, the trunk floor was rotted away. The torsion bar cross member was rotted away. I've replaced those. They're in place now. If you're going to do this work, you want to get that out of the way before you start worrying about putting frame rail connectors in it. You want to make sure you fix the substructure that the frame rail is connecting to. Okay. Now, our frame rail connectors. I get my sheet metal from AMD. AMD is a great company. They give you great service. Their products are really, really nice. Most Chrysler products, most cars off the factory line aren't perfect to begin with. So anytime you buy an aftermarket piece, you can expect to have to do grinding, cutting, and fitting to make it fit right. Don't just slam it on, doesn't fit, hit it with a hammer. You're just going to mess up your job. You're going to be very disappointed in what you've achieved. So take some time, do a little finesse, and these things will fit. Understanding that, again, the factory didn't build them great, so they can't make a part to fit every car perfectly. So frame rail connectors come. There's a left hand and right hand. The left hand, they are trimmed to meet the rough contours of the floor. They'll get a little extra trimming. These part with the notches here go forward. They'll butt up against the torsion bar cross member. These notches are to clear brake line, fuel lines that come around the side of the car and tuck through the holes. So you don't want to lose the notches. And then the rear end of the frame rail connector is cut out to match the shape of the rear floorboard. So we're going to set this up in place just roughly and get moving. Now, you can flip the frame rail connector up over the rear frame, butt it up against the rear floorboard. So you're just going to butt it, we're just going to get it close for now. Frame rail will come up and just probably touch or come close to touching this rear seat support bracket. The board end is supposed to butt against your torsion bar cross member. I have a 2.5-inch clamp. There's a hole in the front of your cross member that came from the factory. You can hook your clamp into that hole, up under your torsion bar mount, and just kind of snug it up for now. You don't have to get this thing rigid tight. It's going to go on and off a few times. And that'll hold that up there. On the back end, I'll just steal this clamp here. Okay. I'm using a small clamp. You have to open it way up. Same thing. You have an access hole here. I put it in the hole. I kind of twist it around. And I can drive this thing up to the frame rail using my clamp. Get this thing good and fairly snug. So I get this, it's snug. So this is the rough position of the frame rail. What we're going to want to do is we want to get this frame rail to come again as far forward so it contacts your torsion bar cross member. I pulled this up and it's not going to go that far. I have some contact right here on the floorboard that'll require some grinding to get this thing to snug forward. I also am contacting the floorboard in a couple of spots where right here where the rear seam is for the footwells. So I'm going to have to clear this out a little bit, and then I can kind of work this forward and get this snug. Why's it got to be snug? Well, you want to weld this thing solid to this cross member. You can't rely on this little tab to do anything for you. That tab's just going to flex, it's going to crack, it's going to come off. And then you go down the road, your frame cross member is going to fall off, or you've wasted your time. So we want to get it forward so we get a good, clean weld here. Welding, the better you can get the fit, the cleaner you get the joint, the much better job you have. I don't care if you got the best welder in town. If you got a big ugly gap and dirty metal, not going to fit. It's not going to be strong and hold. So clean and nice tight joints wherever you can get them. One of the tools I failed to mention we need today is some chalk. What you're going to do is I just use standard kids playground chalk, the chalkboard chalk that they used in school. And I mark wherever I need to trim so I can get it off. It's easy to see that chalk mark. It wipes right back off, so you don't have like a permanent mark that you got to clean off with a solvent. You can trim, mark it, put it back on, and next time you can remark it. You won't get confused. The other thing we're going to have to do is mark the full length of the floorboard in the approximate area that this contacts as well as your frame rails. Why? You have to get this paint off here. You have to get this primer off. You got to get down to good, clean metal. So we'll mark it. We'll take our Dacto sander or our 90-degree rotary sander, and we'll sand this down, clean it up, get to clean metal. Before we install it, we'll go back and reprime that metal using what's called a weld-through primer. Most of these, I think, are a zinc base. There are some different compositions. You want to be careful when buying weld-through primer. There are weld-through primers that cannot be painted over with certain paints. So you have to put them on, you have to weld, and you have to strip them off and clean them, and wherever you don't get it off, you get a little porosity, your paint will bubble up. I believe it's especially true of enamel paints. Don't like weld-through primer. Don't quote me on that, but there are weld-through primers that cannot be painted through. So you want to read carefully before you buy the weld-through primer. I used it was Transtar and SEM primers I like the best. They're not cheap. It's you're looking in the $20-some for a small aerosol can, so use it wisely. Don't paint the whole bottom of the car. What's weld-through primer do? Weld-through primer will give you, first of all, exactly what it says. It's a primer that you can weld, and it is conductive. So you will weld through the primer itself. The primer will open up, give you a good weld, and then it will seal back to the weld as it cools. So you end up with a sealed weld where you're not going to get rust and corrosion. So the weld-through gives you the application where your normal primers, you're going to grind them off, you're going to burn them, and then you got bare metal. So that's really the primary purpose through a weld-through primer, is give you that protection and give you some the conductivity that you can still weld through. When you do weld with weld-through primer, you're going to find you may need to bring your temperatures up a bit. There is a resistance of that weld-through primer. So where you might be using a 3 setting on your welder, you might be up to a 3.5 setting or whatever however your welder is set up. So If you find the setting you normally use, don't be surprised to get the penetration proper. You're going to have to crank that welder up just a little bit to work with the weld-through primer. So here we are, connectors roughed in place. I'm going to go ahead and get my chalk. I'll mark this. We're going to take it back off and start grinding and cleaning, and I want, again, get this thing to fit up tight and fit up as tight to the floorboard as I can. That being said, it's not going to make 100% contact all the way. Again, there's irregularities. So we'll discuss how we solve that in a little bit. Okay, I'll be right back. Thank you. Okay, I'm back. Here we are. Here's my chalk. I use this chalk. I use it on my welding bench. I have a little bench I made. I bought a scrap bench from one of the local stores that was, clearance on their racking and stuff. And I built a welding bench with a little piece of steel on top so I can have a place to do that. I use this for all over. Now I have soapstone. I find the chalk, I like it a lot better. Shows up a lot better. The soapstone tends to be a lighter line, harder to see. So all I'm going to do is take my chalk, just do a rough trace down the frame rail, and then I'll do the back side, so I get a rough idea where this thing is at, and that way I can make sure I get all the rust, all the paint. Simple as that. There's marked around. Now, I also want to mark where I want to trim. So again, I want to trim a little bit here to clear this floorboard. And I got to do the inside too, it appears. And then I got to trim here to clear the floorboard, a little bit off that corner. And the rest of this, there's nothing rigid touching here. So I'm getting it on the inside. I got to do the inside of this also. So I can mark that from here. That's it. So we've got it marked. We can take our clamps loose, we'll take this down, and we're going to start cleaning and grinding and work on the fit for this piece. So let me get these out of the way. I'll just kind of flip that down for now. Get my front foot out, just pop it down. Okay, the cross member's been taken off. I got that set aside and ground ready to go. I've polished up the areas of the floorboard, the frame rail here where I'm going to be welding. Next step will be hit this with some weld-through primer, as I talked earlier. We'll get it back up and make sure to see how she fits and get ready to weld this in place. Now, before I do that, you'll notice I like to wear my safety gear. I know a lot of guys, oh, I don't need that, and you see that some of the fools on TV, they go to weld and they do this number. They're dumbasses. I'm going to tell you the truth right now. If you don't wear your safety gear, you're a dumbass. Sorry about the French, but that's just the truth of it. You have something covering your eyes, protecting your eyes, you're going to end up losing an eyeball, you're going to lose your hearing, then who's the dumbass? So I wear my hearing protection all the time I'm out here. When I'm doing anything with power tools, these are rated safety glasses. In addition, I do wear my face shield. I want to talk to you about some of these tools I'm using here in just a minute. Let me shut this down and shut off the air line, and then we'll go around the bench. I'll talk about the power tools I'm using. So bear with me just a second. Thank you. Okay, well, our sim primer, our weld-through primer is drying. We'll have to take a break for a little bit. So during that time, I thought I'd talk to you about some of the tools we're going to be using. First of all, I talked about the protective gear. I wear a good quality headset. I wear a good face shield. I typically wear my leather gloves. Now, granted, there are times for the dexterity, you can't have a glove on to do something, some of the smaller stuff. But most of the time I wear the gloves. I prefer not to have cuts all over my hands and metal slivers that I can afford. In addition, when I'm welding, I do have a leather jacket and an apron that I wear where I can get the splatter on me. I've caught my clothes on fire before I bought those more than once, and that's not a comfortable feeling. Now, to strip that metal, strip the paint off the metal, I used a 90-degree die grinder, right angle grinder. Some people call them a Docto. That's a brand name. They're really a nice tool. They're not a real expensive tool. I didn't even know what brand this one is. This is the Ingersoll Rand. I have a couple different Rands. I have found the Ingersoll Rand holds up the best. I've had this one for a long time. And I use the 3M style Rotolock discs. Now these suckers are expensive. Every time you burn through one of these, you're probably throwing $1 away. I've seen them as low as 85 cents. I've seen them $1.25 a piece. They come in a lot of different grits of both like a sanding paper or a grinding disc, as well as the Scotch-Brite style, which are great for polishing and cleaning up some parts. But I use these a lot. I use them sparingly. Again, if you go through 20 of them a day, that kicks a pretty good kick out of your normal budget. But the discs change quick, which is nice about them. They just a quarter turn on and off. They're a high-speed grinder polisher. One of the best tools I have for the money. Now, I also have this one. This is another one set up. It's set up with a cutting wheel. I have a couple of these different kinds. The one has the guard with the little smaller. It's rated for a little lower RPM. These are high RPM. The caution here, you want to be extremely careful with these things, with these cutting wheels on them. They are known to explode. I have twice witnessed them exploding and hurting two friends of mine. The worst one, it went through the side of his face, into his cheek, and came out through his mouth. So, caused a lot of damage. It was painful and messy. So, when I'm wearing these, using these cutoff wheels, I'm always wearing a face shield. 100% of the time, I'm wearing that face shield. They're a wonderful tool. They're great for cutting metal and cutting thin metal, but they are extremely dangerous with these cutoff wheels. Look at the rating of the wheels you buy and make sure the rating matches the cutoff tool or the die grinder you're using. If it doesn't, it's going to explode. You're going to catch it and it's coming apart. The one that came apart on me, fortunately, it missed me, but there was a steel furnace in the top of the room made out of stainless steel, and it put a dent in there that you couldn't make with a standard hammer. Whenever possible, I use the grinder with the guard on it. It protects me from sparks and additional protection from the wheel. A little harder to see around it, but for the most part, it's a great tool to use. For my welder, I have a couple different welders. I'm more fortunate than a lot of guys. This is the oldest welder I have, and it's my standby. It's what I'm going to be using for the Real Home Garage series. I actually like it the best as far as quick, easy. It's an inexpensive welder. It's the Lincoln welder. It's a WeldPak 100. They have a couple versions of this. It came with a 3-year guarantee. I've been using this welder for almost 15 years. I have yet to have a problem with it. This is a flux core wire MIG welder. Get the little cores. They're $20 a piece. You'll go through a half a dozen of them building your car, maybe, depending on how much work and customization you're doing. It doesn't have infinite settings, but it's got enough to do what you need to do. Now, you're not going to go weld half-inch steel with this thing, so if that's your intention, it's not going to work for you. But for this body work, it does a fairly good job on this thin sheet metal, floorboards, the frame rail connector I'm going to do. It does a great job. There's a significant amount of spatter with it, so you'll have some grinding and cleaning up to do. You can get a version of this that does have the tank that reduces the splatter, gives you a much nicer, cleaner weld. But again, I'm trying to keep things at the low buck, the low dollar level that the average guy should be able to afford, or can at least borrow from a friend who can afford it, not the $5,000 welder. In addition, I do have a fairly expensive welding helmet. Again, kind of like they say with a motorcycle helmet, if you got a $10 head, get a $10 helmet. I like this one. It's auto dimming. It's lasted me quite a while. This was a Miller welder helmet. I keep it covered, I keep it protective. I've never had a problem with it. I've never even had to change the battery with this thing. It's gone forever. So I really have a good helmet, and I don't like it when I have to flip up and down. And again, don't do this number. Oh, I'm just, going to hit a quick tack. You're going to blind yourself. You're going to burn your corneas. Not a smart thing to do. So, in addition, we got the clamps. Again, assortment of clamps. One thing I'll say about clamps is don't buy a cheap clamp. There's a couple things you don't buy cheap. Clamps is one of them. You get a cheap clamp, you crank down on it, you're trying to pull some metal together. What happens is the clamp twists, turns around, it becomes a useless piece of crap. You throw it in the garbage. So if you're buying clamps, your family's buying your clamps, you're better off to get 2 more expensive clamps than a box of 10 cheapy clamps. The other thing we'll be using a lot of is drill bits. Drill bits are the same way. If you walk into the hardware store and there's the pack of 10 drill bits for $5.99, unless you're going to drill balsa wood and cardboard, they're garbage. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, there's not one in that price range that's going to drill good hard steel or steel consistently that's worth wasting your money on. So if you're going to buy some drill bits, which you are through this job, buy the better quality drill bits. You might pay $3 or $4 for a drill bit. Be careful with it. You don't want to break it, but it'll last a long time and not the frustrations of those dollar store or the home store cheapy 12 for $9.99 drill bits. So again, buy the better quality in those. That's where you need to spend the money for a little better quality. I do have an inexpensive chop saw here. Now, let's talk about money. I'm sorry, but let's talk about money. But I do have a chop saw. I paid $69 for it. It cuts my bar stock, cuts other things. It's lasted forever. I go through a disc once in a while, but I have that as a kind of standby for doing this work. Dollars and cents. I don't think I have $400 in this welder. That's a lot of money when you're talking about a car that you've got a $10,000 budget. That's $400. But you're going to use it over and over and over again. These 90-degree tools, you find them $39 to $59. Again, I like the Ingersoll Rand, but not a lot of money. The helmet, I do have a couple $100 in the helmet. In my safety gear, that's worth spending the money there. So there's some dollars and cents. There's some basic tools we're using. The last thing we'll be using is a series of hammers. You can use your standard ball peen hammer, but it has a rounded front on it, on the face of the ball peen hammer. Not good for sheet metal. You end up putting these little coin dents in your sheet metal. So invest in 1 or 2 reasonable body hammers. I'll show those a little bit later that you can use for doing some flat hammer dolly work, and you're going to have those if you want to do this custom work. So. There's the assortment. This is my cheap welding table I talked about before. I have almost no money in it, but it's great for doing the odd jobs welding off the bench because I can ground the table, clamp the parts in a vise, and it makes it a nice place to work. So, in a minute, once we get this primer dry, we'll go back and we'll start installing this frame rail and finish today. Thank you.